Praise the Lord, Rize. This is an old hymn called Faith of Our Fathers, and I want to dedicate this particular hymn to all of the men that have stepped up to be fathers. And the words are, faith of our fathers living still, in spite of dungeon, fire, and sword. We just want to send this out to all of the fathers. I know it's not a very popular hymn, but it's one that I grew up on listening to and heard particularly around Father's Day. So we want to send not only a happy Father's Day to all the fathers, but want to dedicate this old Father's Day hymn to all of those that have stepped up to be fathers. Faith of our fathers living still, in spite of dungeon, fire, and sword. Oh, how our hearts beat with joy whenever we hear that glorious word. Faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death. Third verse says, faith of our fathers we will love, both friend and foe, in all of our strife, and preach thee true as love knows how, by kindly words and virtuous life. Faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death. Till death, we will be true to thee till death. And our Jesus is known as the Prince of Peace, Wonderful Counselor. His name is wonderful, and the Everlasting Father. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. There to my heart was the blood applied, singing glory to his name. I'm singing glory to his name, precious name. Glory to his name, precious name. There to my heart was the blood applied, singing glory to his name. There are so many wonderful things about Jesus. So many wonderful things about him. There are so many wonderful things about Jesus. So many wonderful things about him. His name is wonderful. He's a wonderful counselor. There's so many wonderful things about him. Glory to his name. precious name. Glory to his name, precious name. There to my heart was the blood applied, singing glory to his name. Faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death. We will be true to thee till death. Happy Father's Day.
To love. That brings us to the Anahata chakra. Anahata chakra. I didn't hear it that way before. I've always heard the heart chakra, but it's really called the Anahata chakra. And as we know, as Rize, our liturgical calendar aligns with the chakras. And for every discipline that we study, there's a chakra that we focus on to help us achieve the discipline in that season. So today we are engaging the Anahata, or the heart chakra. The heart chakra helps us to keep balance, and it keeps our emotions balanced. It cultivates a deeper sense of self-awareness and helps us to build meaningful relationships with others. It is the bridge, if you will, between the lower chakras and the upper chakras. It balances the material and the spiritual worlds and facilitates our emotional and physical well-being. This is the chakra where reciprocal, pure love flows, allowing us to receive and give love unconditionally without attachment or expectation. So what does Anahata mean? It means unstruck or not having been struck. So when the Anahata, or the heart chakra, is balanced and clear, it means that the negative emotions and traumatic experiences, the limiting beliefs about self and others, have not struck what we came here with. The positive emotions, the ability to heal through experiences, the expansive beliefs about self and others that allows us to love pure and reciprocal, to flow over the bridge from the material to the spiritual and make us individually and our community whole again. Unstruck chakra. So how can a balanced heart chakra do all that? Well, thank you for asking. The heart chakra stores and distributes the life force energy and maintains the air element breath, Ruach HaKodesh. I have a question for you, and I do want you to answer out loud. If you have, you can unmute yourself. Have you ever heard from someone who is proclaiming their love for someone else and they said, oh, they just take my breath away? You ever heard that?
Yes.
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 Normally when we hear that.
Yes.
What do we do? What's our normal response? Anybody? Yeah, our breath be taken with them. Our breath gets taken when theirs get taken because we just sharing in all that good love. And here's a question. I did a little bit of study. I'm not the expert, but I do know a little bit more than I did before I started this whole journey. And when I read over this, I wondered about this balance and this idea of taking someone's breath away because you're so in love with them. And after studying what the heart chakra does and what it's connected to, the heart itself, the lungs, and a little gland that sits right here called the thymus gland, which regulate the flow in the body. I wonder if our proclamations of love that is signaled by our breath being taken away is a sign that perhaps that's not the type of love that leads to balance physically, emotionally, or spiritually. We might want to release from that kind of hold, the hold that someone else can take your breath away so that we can live and love in healthy ways. Yeah, I know it's a lot, but it's something to think about. Because we get air from the atmosphere when we breathe. And if we don't refresh the air element regularly, we get fatigued and we start acting in, energy's low and we're disconnected from our emotions and from our creative spirit. So if love situates us in relationship with another and we find them taking our breath away, what happens to our emotional balance or our sense of joy in life or our creativity or our harmony or ability to be free to love? So a balanced heart chakra exudes love that is balanced, reciprocal, unconditional, and free of attachment. What does that mean? Well, in simple terms, it promotes feeling content and at ease with oneself. Feeling unconditional love and respect for self and others, having healthy relationships with no negative attachments or harmful addictions, experiencing peace and joy within, regardless of external conditions, forming deep and meaningful connections with others effortlessly, trusting others, and feeling comfortable and vulnerable. When our heart chakra is not working free and clear, it is imbalanced and leads to feelings of loneliness and isolation and inability to connect with oneself and others. You might even find yourself distrusting of others and having difficulty sharing your feelings with others. You might experience fear of rejection, so you don't reach out much. Or you lack trust in a committed relationship, so you self-isolate even when your partner is only an arm's length away. You start to have issues with giving and receiving affection, so you self-sabotage and tell yourself, no one loves me, so why should I love? Overdependency sets in a relationship, believing that you need your partner to do and do and do until they're over slap out and you haven't even had the benefit of enjoying each other because your to-do list was too long. Then after all they have done and done, you give the cold shoulder because they didn't meet your needs intimately. So you get a little tough around the edges and appearing unemotional, the appearance while feeling vulnerable. And some of us, our heart chakra is so out of balance that we have physical symptoms, such as heart palpitations. It starts beating irregularly, or we have poor blood circulation. We start having heart pain, angina, or even problems like asthma because we are so restricted in our loving that we constrict our main airways. And then we start to have things like bronchitis, bronchioles, and the alveoli in our lungs are so tight. We get admitted to the hospital and the doctors say, what's wrong with you? Because there's no medical cause for your condition, even though it's a matter of the heart. So then they have to call for your chaplain, AKA spiritual health specialist. You got to call the chaplain in to come in and have that heart-to-heart conversations. There's no needles, no syringes, no scalpels, just some good old-fashioned spirit work. Holding up the mirror so you can get that heart chakra back balanced, so you can breathe again, so you can release the tension that you have been bound with, the ones you're binding yourself with, and allow yourself to be free again to love yourself and someone else. Well, let me shift because I feel like somebody's getting ready to text Pastor right now and tell her this chick is talking about all this other stuff other than this text that she named. So let me go ahead and get over to this other sacred text, even though for the record, our lived experiences is a sacred text. But I'm going to go over to Galatians chapter 5, so I don't get in trouble. Text from Pastor saying this girl done talked too long. Let's go to Galatians chapter 5, verse 13 through 15. And I'm going to show y'all how this little conversation about what we go through connects with the text. It says, for you were called to freedom, brothers and sisters, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love become enslaved to one another. For the whole law is summed up in a single commandment: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. If, however, you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another. So what does this text have to do with celebrating Juneteenth, Father's Day, and Pride Month? Well, Paul, he's formerly known as Saul, is the one attributed for writing this text. He had a kind of a sordid past. You know, when When he was known as Saul, he was the one that was enforcing the law and persecuting those people who were choosing to follow Jesus. In fact, the biblical text records that he was the one with the letter in his hand that gave him permission to arrest the followers of Yeshua. But on Damascus Road, he had a conversion experience. On the way to deliver the letter, something happened, and instead he experienced a freedom that shifted his love from the letter of the law to Jesus and the people who followed Yeshua. So with the conversion experience and a name change, Paul is now a staunch advocate for the very people he once persecuted. And he now challenges the missionaries, those on a mission to teach conversion and allegiance to governmental law, upheld by the ecclesia, enforced by their police. He's on a mission now to challenge them. So this pericope comes from the same Paul after the circumcision conversation, where Paul is saying to the brothers, resist the missionaries' demand for circumcision to show your commitment to the law. Because of what Christ has done, that signifying is no longer necessary. Some scholars suggest that Paul is saying that circumcision at this point was a sign of enslavement and possession. So he's urging the believers in Jesus in the church at Galatia to not follow the missionary agenda, but to follow God's agenda revealed through Jesus, which fulfills the law. And in that statement of loving your neighbor as yourself. So see, the real problem here though, is Paul got wind that the church of Galatia, with all of their new freedom through Jesus, started acting in ways that evidence they were not treating each other well. They were so free that they were lawless. Lawless within themselves and with each other. So the church police, the missionaries were coming to them to make them succumb and obey the law, because clearly they did not know how to act with this new freedom. I heard Toni Morrison say it like this: freeing yourself was one thing, claiming ownership of that freed self was another. And this is where the church of Galatia struggled. Being free does not mean that you are careless and live any kind of way. Instead, living free, Paul says, is demonstrated through love, where you are slaves to each other. Now, is that part right there? Because this is the same Paul who 2 chapters ago in chapter 3, verse 28 said, there is no Jew, no Greek, there's no bond, no free, there's no male, nor female, for you are all one in Christ. Now here he goes talking about being slaves to one another. But Paul is up to something. Paul shifts the whole conversation, beginning in verse 13, to say that when the flesh rears up and becomes problematic in how the community is to be in relationship with each other, instead of going back to the law, which binds, go to love, which frees you, because that is what God called you to. It says, for you were called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love, become enslaved to one another. So what is he saying here? Well, the key word here, one of them is opportunity. Because actually the word is aphorme, A-P-H-O-R-M-E, aphorme, which means a staging area or a base for military campaign. So what Paul is actually saying is, do not use your freedom as a staging area or a base for military campaign for your own good. Here's the paradox. Use your freedom, your base, your military campaign for the good of everyone else. So on Juneteenth, why this text? Well, the word here in English translation also is slave. However, it is translated from douleo, D-O-U-L-E-U-O, which means serve, not slave. So the proper read of this text is, through love, serve one another, just like you did when you were enslaved, when you had no choice in the matter. See, so now that God has called you to freedom through Jesus, through Yeshua, through his example, from all of the oppressive forces that affected your heart chakra and you are not well, choose to be intentional in rebalancing of the heart and choose love. When your ego rises up to make you feel like you should be the only one who prospers, choose love and share your wealth. When rivalry raises its head and you want to compete against your siblings, your parents, your aunties, your uncles, your cousins, choose love and teach them what you know. Practice some ujima, some collective work and responsibility. When autonomy raises up in you and you want to self-govern at the expense of family and community, choose love. So interdependence and umoja, the thing to strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, and nation and race. And maybe choose some Ubuntu. So because I exist, because you exist, and because we exist, we are human together. Paul is able to make the shift from individualism and personal relationship to a community and reciprocity. Here, Paul gives an unprecedented response to resisting the desire to misuse freedom. Paul is giving this advice in a time when the dominant culture of that time was that of the Stoics. And the Stoics say that freedom is doing what you want, when you want, of your own will and desires, and avoiding the things that would hamper your individual freedom. Of course, that's my version of it. But that's basically what they were talking about. And Paul's advice seems counterintuitive under the prevailing thought. However, it transforms and shifts the notion of slavery and its proposed understanding of slavery to that of love, which means performing mutual acts of service to each other and promote communal care. So if you're going to be a slave to anything, be a slave to love, performing mutual acts of service to each other and promote communal care. But Paul's not done. He then adds another parody, which he reminds the Galatian community that the whole law is summed up in the Levitical law in verse 14. Love your neighbor as yourself. This statement was in direct opposition to the missionaries who were preaching law over love. And Paul, once a man of the law, having experienced God's love and having experienced himself a liberative and transformative spirituality, he is now free to love, to choose love, because out of his own experience, that's why we can't describe our experience, but out of his own experience with love, he now chooses to interpret the law not in a legalistic way, but in a loving way. He's inviting us to do the same on this Juneteenth, on this Father's Day, in this Pride Month, when culturally the Black family in all of its many iterations has been under attack for centuries, yet we are here together and set to rise to the level of the heart as we recalibrate for some and maintain for others the heart chakra. Paul is suggesting to us that our own experiences are valid for hermeneutical interpretation. And he now proclaims and reclaims the law from its oppressive use to a more liberative engagement by saying, people of Rize, this is the ultimate reclamation of our bodies from enslavement. It is to use the flesh, the sarts, and everything about it for the fulfilling of God's law, which is to love. Love self and neighbor. That is the only sign we need to see that matters now that you are free. Essentially, God called you to freedom, Rize, so you can be free to love. For the whole law has been brought to fulfillment in one saying, love self and neighbor. What we say at Rize is love is the ability to show compassion, nurture, honor, and commitment to God, self, and neighbor. Because if we forget, verse 15 comes into play. It says, if, however, you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another. If the church at Galatia does not live free, which means to engage in reciprocal acts of service to each other and choose love, then they will die hard, biting, devouring, and consuming each other. If this happens among them, Paul can safely say that love didn't win, But that would translate to us today and say the heart chakra is severely blocked in that church. The love, the breath is being stifled out of the bridge of the heart chakra between the upper and the lower chakras. And things are broken and our lungs are constricting and breath is being snuffed out. There's no healthy antibodies being formed in the thymus. Dis-ease is settling in, and the racist, capitalist, patriarchal, evangelical, sexist, misogynist, homophobic, transphobic, biphobic, AIDS-phobic missionaries, their agenda is gaining momentum. So we have to rise, and get our balance back so we can live and be free to love. Brad Braxton, in True to Our Native Land, says, when communities fail to accentuate the primacy of the love ethic, a destructive, competitive, impulsiveness is unleashed, which consumes individuals and erodes communal bonds. But this whole passage today in Galatians that gives us the invitation to really embrace our freedom, the call from God to be free to love, can really be said this way. Toni Morrison took her pen and she wrote these words. She wrote it about persons in her story, beloved, who were enslaved, yet they were free to love. So if they were enslaved, yet free to love, what more can we do, Rize, who have been called to freedom, who are free and who love? Here's our affirmation for today. Here's our spiritual nugget. When she gives instructions, follow. Open your heart chakra so we can be free to love. She says, in this here place, we flesh that weeps, laughs, flesh that dances on bare feet in grass. Love it hard. Yonder, they do not love your flesh, they despise it. They don't love your eyes, they just as soon pluck them out. No more do they love the skin on your back, yonder they flay it. And oh, my people, they do not love your hands. Those they only use, tie, bind, chop off, and leave empty. So love your hands, love them, raise them up and kiss them. Touch others with them, pat them, stroke them on your face, because they don't love that either. You got to love it. You. And no, they ain't in love with your mouth. Yonder out there, they will see it broken and break it. What you say out of it, they will not heed. What you scream from it, they do not hear. What you put into it to nourish your mind, they will soon snatch it away and give you leavings instead. No, they don't love your mouth. You got to love it. This is flesh I'm talking about here. Flesh that needs to be loved. Feet that need to rest and to dance. Backs that need support. Shoulders that need arms. Strong arms, I'm telling you. And all my people out yonder, hear me. They do not love your neck unloosed and straight. So love your neck and put a hand on it. Grace it. Stroke it. And hold it up. And all your inside parts that they just as soon slop for hogs, you gotta love them. The dark, dark liver, love it. Love it and beating heart, love that too, more than eyes or feet, more than lungs that have yet to draw free air, more than your life-holding womb, your life-giving private parts. Hear me now, love your heart. For this is the prize. Now go be free to love yourselves in the fullness and beauty of who you are, Rize. Be free to love on this Father's Day, this Juneteenth Eve, in Pride Month. Ashe, ashe, ashe-o.
Ashe-o.
Asheo. Ashe.
Amen.
Ashe.